Hello guys, Oroth here and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're gonna finally take a look at a Tempest build I've created. I've been theory crafting a lot and this actually blows my mind because, to be honest, I don't like Tempest that much. I think it's a bit boring to play, but it deals tons of damage and I'm gonna show you really soon. And you know me by now, I love to deal a lot of damage, so of course I have to admit now that I kind of like Tempest as well. In this video I'm gonna dive a little bit deeper. I'm gonna show you the regular stuff like which skills I'm using, the essences and the legendary gems of course, but I'm also gonna dive deeper into my stats and we're gonna take a look at every little detail, and hopefully that will help you if you want to work towards something. You can copy what I'm doing here and you will also get great results. But let's just move on and start by taking a look at the skills. And before we do so, I also want to tell you that you are free to join my Discord server. I will post a link in the description. In there I often post builds before I release them on my channel, and there are also tons of knowledgeable players that can help you if you have any questions, and it's just a great community, so don't miss out on it and please join the Discord server. Let's move on now and take a look at the skills I'm using for this build. And here we can see that I use the Wind Edge primary attack, but of course we will be using the Roiling Surf, so this basically does nothing. In the first skill slot I use Roiling Surf, in the second skill slot I use Crosswinds, in the third skill slot I use Squall, and in the fourth and final skill slot I use Flowing Strike. And I don't think that this skill combination is anything unique, but there are some very interesting mechanics at play here that will buff our damage by quite a lot when we look at the rest of my setup. So let's continue now and take a look at the set pieces I'm using. And here we can see that I use 4 pieces of Baron. This is both to prolong harmful effects, which is very important in this build. I'm going to explain to you why a little bit later. I also use 2 pieces of Vitus Urge. This is the staple for all builds in Diablo Immortal almost. And finally I also use 2 pieces of the Entwinter set. And of course here you can change it for something else, but I will have 100% uptime on this damage buff. But there are other 2 piece effects that gives the same damage amount, so feel free here to just use the best duo that you have in your arsenal with the best stats. So that is the set compilation. I can mention here that I've been trying out to play with 4 pieces of Vitu and change out some essences. I've been trying out 4 pieces of Grace. I've been trying a lot of different combinations, but this has been the most successful one for me. But I just wanted to mention that before moving on. Of course, it's very interesting to look at the essences, and in the helmet slot I use Look Leeward. This is a Squall essence, and what this does is that it places a debuff on the target, which means that whenever this debuff runs out, I will deal a certain percentage of the total amount of damage I dealt to the target. And this is actually very similar to this main hand called Screaming Gale. This does basically the same thing. It will also place a debuff, and we can see here that the Look Leeward helmet will deal 28.5% extra damage when the debuff wears off, or when I use Squall again on the target. And if we look on the Screaming Gale, it's 40% extra damage. We can see that here if we go to the skill page and we go to Squall. That's a great tip as well. If you want to know what an essence is doing, a lot of information is missing from the essence text, so always go here on the skill page and you can see what it does. And here we can see that I get 40% damage after the debuff wears off thanks to the main hand. So in total that's 68.5% burst damage whenever the debuff wears off. So let me show you this now. If I go to the training dummy here and I use Squall, we can see that I place 2 debuffs on the target. And the duration of these are the same for both the helmet effect and the main hand effect. And what's important here is that we actually want 0 downtime of this debuff, so that all of the damage we are dealing to the target will add extra damage thanks to the Squall. And that's why it's so important to use the Baron set, because it will prolong harmful effects. So yeah, very, very important for this build, because if I don't use the Baron set, there will be portions of time where the Squall debuff is not active on the target, and all the damage I deal in between during that downtime will not get buffed from the Squall. So that's why it's so important. And there are also other ways to increase and make sure that this is 100% uptime. I'm going to show you that later when we look at the magical attributes on my legendary items. If we move on here and take a look at the chest piece, I use Memento Onus. And what this does is that whenever I use Flowing Strike, I will stun the target, and I will also, if I deal a critical hit, summon 2 Zephyrs. And this is very important because I will have 100% uptime on this stun when I attack the dummy or most enemies, anything that I can stun really. And this will also activate the Ship of Stone Flesh here, which means that the damage effect from Ship of Stone Flesh will be up 100% of the time. It's also important to have a lot of Zephyrs, because the Zephyrs deal a lot of damage, and I also use other essences that synergize with this, so I'm gonna go through them one by one here. If we move on, we can see in the shoulder slot I use United Defiance, and what this does is basically that whenever I use Flowing Strike, I will also conjure 1 additional Zephyr. So this means that you can have a maximum of 3 Zephyrs always, and thanks to the shoulder and to the chest, whenever I use Flowing Strike, I will summon 3 Zephyrs as long as a critical hit, and I will do that almost all the time. And also the cooldown of the Flowing Strike is quite low, which means that yeah, I will always have 3 Zephyrs up, which is really, really important for this setup to deal as much damage as possible. If we move on here, we can take a look at the really, really interesting choice. I use the Spine-Tooth Greaves. And those of you who know your Tempest might ask, why the hell am I using a Storm Fury essence? Because here we can see that this is a Storm Fury essence that says that whenever I deal damage with Storm Fury, it will buff my primary attack speed. But for some reason, this pants actually works with this offhand here, Hurricane Hitch, and this is a Crosswind offhand. So we can see now that whenever I use Crosswind, I will shoot these wind blades, and you can also see now on the top left that I actually get this Storm Fury buff as well. I can mention that this is of course not intended, but I just wanted to put it here because it's cool. You can switch this essence out and use this one called Windswept Promise. This will work equally well. The difference is just maybe 5% less damage when I use that pant. So yeah, if they fix this Spine-Tooth Greaves so it doesn't work with the Crosswinds, then you can just switch to that other pant instead. We have already looked at almost all the essences, but let's take a look at the last ones here as well. In the second maintenance slot I use Skein Potter, and of course this is a staple for Tempest if you want to deal a lot of damage. This means that whenever I use Flowing Strike, you can see these water blades that shoots out, and this will also be attacked from the Zephyrs. So this is a very, very big source of damage output. And finally, if we look in the second offense slot, we can see Sip of the Breath. And what it says is whenever I pick up one of those mist-touched orbs, I will gain increased attack and movement speed. And here we can see one of these orbs. When I pick it up, yeah, I will just attack faster. So I have tons of attack speed in this setup, which is really good. And yeah, it's also important to mention that this offhand will stack with these pants, and they will also stack with the other pants that I showed you earlier. So you can feel free to use all of them in combination. It's not going to be an issue. Later on, I'm going to show you how this build works. We're going to do some dummy runs, and I'm going to explain to you some important elements and how they synergize with all of these essences. But let's go through my whole setup first before doing so that we can discuss all the synergies in the end. Of course, we have to take a look at the legendary gems, And in this video I'm not going to show you any low resonance version. I have been trying out with a lot of damage gems as well, from the 1-star and 2-star category, and this build works very well as well in terms of damage output. But here is the min-maxed optimal version that I'm using, and here we can see that I have a Blood-Soaked Jade, I have a Bottled Hope, I have a Colossus Engine, I have a Blood Flow, a Roiling Consequence, a Ship of Stone Flesh, and I have a rank 8 Gloom Cask and a rank 8 Wolfort. And of course here I have to mention that some people, if they watch this video and see my damage output, they will think that okay, of course I deal a lot of damage when I have these type of gems equipped. But if you pay close attention, I'm going to break down every single detail of this build, and you will understand how perfected almost everything is. And then you will understand that damage output has a lot to do with every single detail of your setup, and that's what I'm trying to teach you in most of my videos. Let's move on and take a look at the Paragon I'm using as well. And yeah, before doing so, the general theme here is of course damage output. So back in the days I always used a lot of 1-star and 2-star gems, but lately they have released a lot of strong 5-star gems, and unfortunately I would have to say the top damage dealers now will be people with these high ranked 5-star gems. They are now just as strong as the 2-star and 1-star gems, so you can get great DPS effects from the 5-star gems, and this was not the case if we go back in time a little bit. And that's a little bit of a pity in my opinion, because I liked it when it was possible for everyone to be at the very top level of DPS dealing. You can still be that with 1-star and 2-star gems, but of course if you compare yourself with someone like me, who is not only min-maxed in the legendary gem category, I'm also min-maxed in almost every category that I can be min-maxed in, and you will see that now when I break down the entire setup. Let's move on here and take a look at the Paragon I'm using. We can see here that I use the Slinger category, and here I use Unseen Dynamism for some damage, and Gifted to stack this Unseen Dynamism even more. I also use Bloodthirst, Fury and Superiority. And we can see here that the legendary skill I'm using from the Paragon is Overloaded. I've been trying out a lot of different combinations with the Paragon, and no matter how hard I try, I cannot come up with anything better than this. The legendary skill here, it's not super strong, but compared to the other ones, this is giving a little bit of extra juice, but it's very minimal. But yeah, here you have my Paragon setting. Let us of course also move on and take a look at my familiars, and let's start by taking a look at my main familiar. I use a Skitterwicht. I would maybe prefer if it was a Brute Talon, but it doesn't really matter. The most important thing here is that I can have 200 insight, because the insight will stack, buff the lingering wounds. So you can see here that the original value is 29.8% increased damage, but thanks to 200 insight I get 9% extra. And this debuff is an armor break that you place on the target that will trigger every 20 seconds when the familiar attacks. And what's good is also that when I use a 2-piece of Baron, it will also prolong this armor break. So that's another reason why the Baron set is so strong. And if we look here, I also have the Phalanx skill, and what it says is that if your life is above 75%, you receive a 2.25% damage increase. If your life drops below, you will gain some defense, but yeah, this is not important for the dummy of course. And this effect can stack up to 200%, and thanks to the lingering wounds and from the poison effect from the active skill, this will be at maximum value whenever the familiar attacks. So we can do a test here. You can see now that the familiar is on cooldown, and whenever the familiar attacks the dummy, you can see a buff on the top left corner, and you can see now that there's also a symbol above the familiar, and you can see here that it's the maximum effect from the Phalanx. It's not super strong, but it just gives a little bit of extra juice. If I could choose, I would also like to have this combination with blue tenacity, because if I have blue tenacity, that reduces the cooldown slightly of the active skill. If I would have that, then the familiar 20-second cycle would be perfectly synced with the legendary gems, because whenever the cooldown is ready for the familiar, there is like a small delay before the familiar attacks. So if I keep attacking and over a long fight in a gauntlet, for example, after some time the familiars will sometimes be a little bit off sync with your legendary gems. That's why the blue tenacity is so good. When we look at the familiars, we of course also take a look here at the bonded familiars, and here you can see that I have stacked the main trait together with the bestial might, because this will give me a lot of extra critical hit chance. You can see here that I get 8%, and I also get 12% from bestial might. And what's so good about this combination is, of course, primary attack damage is actually very good with this particular build, and the critical hit chance is always important. And what's good is that every familiar that can have maim can also have bestial might. So we can see here that I have a Dusk Prowler, I have a Varog, I have a Quake Strider, and I also have a Brood Talon. Optimally, I would have a Brood Talon with the active and passive skills of the Skirwick. I mean the passive skills, of course, because if I had the Brood Talon with the correct traits and those skills, I could also swap in one of these Bumble Stalkers, because as we can see here, the Bumble Stalker can also have bestial might, and in that case I would actually have 16.5% primary attack damage instead of 12%. So there is slight room for improvements here when we look at the familiars, but I'm almost min-max for PvE content when we look at this setup here. If we move on, we can take a look at the Warband room, and here I'm also going to show you something very amazing. I use the attacker damage room. I've actually been having similar results with the attack speed room as well, but I think that the damage room has a slight edge still. But what's so impressive here is that we can take a look at the remnants in this Warband room. So I urge you, if you don't have any good remnant set, you have to go out with your warband and purge the depths. And I can also mention that if you go with your full warband with 8 people, the drops will be better. I just found this out recently. I didn't know that before. So if you want to find a good set, please gather your whole warband. And we can see here that I have the critical hit chance increased by 1%. I have all of the blue remnants, and I also have 2 of the important yellow remnants. So this is almost the best remnant combination that you can have in the game, and I've been working really hard to farm for this set, and this will also help me to increase my damage by a bit. So as I mentioned, every little detail counts. So yeah, I focus on exactly everything. But let's move on and also take a look at my Reforges. And if we scroll down here, we can see them. I use damage to enemies suffering loss of control, damage to demons, attack speed, duration of beneficial effects, and critical hit damage. I use this because the family bonus from Vengeance is very strong, and it will trigger around every 9 or 10 seconds when I have it on all the items. So this is the combination I use on every item. Of course, damage done to demons does not help against the dummy, but it's very strong and potent in a gauntlet or in a raid. And of course, the damage done to enemies suffering loss of control does not work against bosses, but it works in very well in both PvP and most PvE content against most enemies. So I really like this setup. What I could possibly change here is that I could replace critical hit damage with maybe skill damage, or for this build optimal would probably be primary attack damage. And the reason for that is that I reach the cap for critical hit damage whenever the blood flow is active. So if I go here to my attribute page, we can see that I have 42% critical hit damage, and when I look at the armor penetration, I get 56%. So I get a bit above 100% whenever, sorry, it's actually 98% without the blood flow. But whenever the blood flow activates, I get 40% extra critical hit damage, and then I will actually be 18% above the cap. So it would make sense to reduce my critical hit damage by 18% and put in primary attack damage or skill damage. For this build, primary attack damage would be better, but skill damage is maybe better overall. So yeah, I just wanted to give you the detailed breakdown here and my reasoning around certain choices. Let us also take a look at the curse effect. I'm using 6 pieces of Vexed, and what this does is that every 30 seconds all of my Zephyrs will get an attack speed buff and attack a little bit faster. And I also use 2 pieces of Atrophied, and this is just optional, of course. It gives a little bit of extra damage in the initial phase when I engage a gauntlet boss or the training dump here. And I can of course also mention, while we're at it, I know that Ship of Stone Flesh does not work on a boss, so it will only work on one of the training dummies. This build still works very, very well on a boss, but if I'm fighting only a boss, then maybe I switch this out for something like a Spectre Glass, for example. There are some other choices as well, and it's also possible in that case that maybe I would even change up my entire setup, because since I can't activate the damage done to enemies suffering loss of control and the ship, maybe I would be better off if I use the Squall chest that increases my damage output. But to be honest, I think this chest is still really good because I get 3 Zephyrs up all the time, and when I've been trying out different versions on the boss dummy, this build still works very, very well, and maybe even the best. But of course, as I mentioned earlier, depending on your current setup, different essence combinations might work best for you. So there's not one. Sometimes it is, but it's not always just one combination of essences that will work best for everyone. So just keep that in mind, and please let me know in the comments how different combination works for you. Maybe you have some input as well. Let's move on from the curse effect and take a look at my important runes as well. Here we can see that in the rune slot here on the helmet and the shoulder, I use the Oath runes. These will give me cooldown reduction, and it's very, very important for this build to have the right amount of cooldown reduction in order for me to deal as much damage as possible, because I want the cooldown of Squall to be just perfect. I will explain it in the end why this is so important. But yeah, it's possible if I manage to get a little bit more cooldown reduction on some of these items, I could possibly replace one of these runes for one of those yellow runes that gives beneficial effect duration, or that more expensive red rune that also gives beneficial effect duration. But I would say that I probably believe that the yellow rune will be better. Let me show you here. If I would use the tier here, I also get some attack speed, and this I will not get from the red rune that gives beneficial effect duration. So I still think that this would perform a little bit better. But in order for me to use one of those runes, I would have to get 4% cooldown reduction on the gloves, on the necklace here, and also on this ring for it to work properly. So just keep that in mind. And remember now that I also have a Bottled Hope that gives me 6% cooldown reduction. So now I'm just theory crafting in very, very small details about something that I could do to maybe increase my damage a little bit. Because if I could switch this rune out for beneficial effect duration, I would have a little bit more uptime on most of my legendary gems here, which increases my damage by quite a lot. So that's why beneficial effect duration is so important. If we look at some other important runes here, I use these runes here that gives critical hit damage in the main hand slots. And of course, as I mentioned, if I use these runes, I can replace some of the Reforges. I haven't done that yet, so there's still room for improvement. But yeah, very solid choice here. And in the offense slot here, I use the Zoo runes that gives critical hit chance. There is also red rune that gives damage done to enemies suffering loss of control. I have not been able to get my hands on any of those yet, but it's possible that those will work even better. We can go here to the market and take a look actually, so you know what I'm talking about. And if we go here, and we can see that we have the what is it called now again? Here it is, the rare rune, because this will both give primary attack damage and damage done to enemies suffering loss of control. And when we are attacking dummy here, it will constantly be under loss of control, so I would get the full effect here all the time. And it's possible, I actually think that this rune would perform better than the Zoo runes I'm using right now. But yeah, they are quite expensive. Maybe it's even worth it for me to get this one, but yeah, I will pick them up later and try it out. So still some room for improvements there when we look at the runes. The big secret, of course, when we talk about damage output, is also to take a look at the magical attributes of my items. And this is something that everybody has to focus on. And if you don't do that, you will lose out on tons of damage. And I have a lot of one-to-one sessions because some people, they book me for an hour or two where I go through their character and I go through their build, and I can see that sometimes they have a super good legendary gem setup, but their magical attributes is totally wrong. And I tell them what to do, and after just a few days they have doubled or tripled the damage when they focus on these things. And this is why I am able to deal so much damage. So we're gonna, in this video, go through all of my items and look at it in detail. So first of all, here we can see that I have both cooldown reduction, which is super important for most builds, and I also have damage done by my summons. And this is very good for the Tempest because it will increase the damage of my Zephyrs. So a very, very strong necklace, and it also has strength on it, which is also very important. Fortitude and willpower is only important up to a certain point. I'm not gonna dive into why, but secondaries doesn't matter after a certain point in PvE content, and I recently released a video about that. So if you're interested to know more about the secondaries and what the sweet spot is for PvE content, please check that video. But what I'm looking for mostly here is strength, but the most important thing is the magical attributes. So a very, very strong necklace. The only thing that could get better is if I had 4% cooldown reduction on it, as I mentioned earlier. If we look here in the glove slot, I have cooldown reduction, and I also have damage to enemies suffering loss of control. So very, very strong item as well. In the waist here, I have beneficial effect duration. That's the most important thing, and I couple it with strength, so very, very good. But maybe it would be even better to have something like this with only 2 attributes and strength with beneficial effect duration. That would increase my damage a little bit, because strength will raise my base damage. This is not a big source of damage increase, but of course when we are min-maxing, we want to look at every single detail. So if I can make one change that increases my damage by 0.1%, then I'm happy, because I can do hundreds of those changes, and that's what adds up in the end. If we move on here and take a look at the rings, I both have cooldown reduction, and I also have damage increased to enemies below 30% life, and I also have strength, so very good. For PvE content, I would actually prefer if this had a red socket, because as I mentioned, since I'm so much above the threshold for what's reasonable for PvE, I don't need the sapphire. It would be better if I had a tourmaline. The difference would be small, but as I said, every detail matters. And the same goes here for the second ring. We can see that I both have cooldown reduction, damage to enemies below 30% life, and I have strength on it. So very, very strong rings indeed. Here on the bracelets, the magical attributes doesn't really matter because they're all defensive. So what I want here is that I want to have 2 attributes with strength. That's the most important thing, and we can see here that I have it on both of the bracelets. If we move on here and look at the helmet, I use the ancient legendary helmet here, and the reason why I picked the Horse-Splitter Spirit is because I get beneficial effect duration, and I also get this damage while moving increase. And with this build, thanks to Roiling Surf, I can move around all the time to make sure that this fix is active all the time. I also get the beneficial effect duration. I cannot get that from any other helmet, and I explained to you already why that is so important. I also use critical hit chance, and you can see here that I enchanted this helmet to replace my critical hit damage with skill damage. It's possible that attack speed would perform a little bit better with this build. I'm not sure, I haven't tried it, but overall skill damage is better for most builds. So a very solid helmet here. If we move on here and take a look at the chest slot, the only normal attribute I want is the beneficial effect duration. So I have 6% here, and on top of that I often want to add a terror affix that syncs well with my build, and that's why I use the crosswinds here. It's decent. It's not a huge source of damage increase, but it's okay. And we can see here in the pants slot I have the same methodology here. I use beneficial effect duration, and I also have squall here. And it's actually important that I have some squall affixes, because this will ensure that there will be no downtime on the target when I attack it. So let's just try it out now to illustrate. If you look now below the health bar, whenever I use squall, there is a debuff, and we can see now that the debuff will go away before the skill is ready. But when I'm on Roiling Surf, and if I use the squall like this, you can see now that the cooldown will be ready before the debuff goes away. So this means that thanks to this terror fix here of squall, maybe it's enough with 1 out of 4, but I have 2 out of 4. Thanks to this, I will have 100% uptime on the squall, and this increases the damage output by a lot. So without it, my damage would be a lot lower. We can continue here and take a look at my shoulder slot. Here I have attack speed, critical hit chance, and critical hit damage. Maybe I would like to have a shoulder here with a critical hit chance and skill damage or attack speed, and also Roiling Surf. So the Roiling Surf fix will also increase the damage quite a lot when I use this setup. I have not been able to find any shoulder that will outperform this one. I have a shoulder with Roiling Surf and primary attack damage on it, but it performs slightly less. So that's why I'm still using this shoulder, but definitely room for improvement here. And as mentioned earlier, the critical hit damage here almost does nothing since I'm above the cap, so I don't need it in my case. If we move on here and take a look at the first main hand slot, we can see that I have squall and crosswinds. I also have critical hit chance and damage done to enemies suffering loss of control. So this is a very good item. It's possible that I don't need these terror fixes. It's maybe better if I would have something else that looks like this weapon, because here is a true beauty. I have damage done to enemies suffering loss of control, damage increased to enemies below 30% life, I have skill damage and critical hit chance. So what an amazing item, and this increases the damage by a lot. And I can say that an item like this I can keep for several difficulties, because as long as I'm above the recommended combat rating, the only thing that is important when I look on my items are these magical attributes. So of course, if I run gauntlets, I maybe need to raise my combat rating, but in almost all cases, when we talk about dungeons, if we talk about Vanguard, or most content, the combat rating is not important. So keep that in mind. Don't salvage any superb items whenever you go to new difficulty, whenever you find something new. Keep them until you find something better in terms of magical attributes. That's the path forward if you want to be as impactful as possible in most types of content. If we move on here and take a look at the offense, and here is maybe where I have the most room for improvement. We can see here that I have damage done to enemies suffering loss of control and critical hit chance, and I also have this Riptide fix that does basically nothing. I would probably have something that looks like this if I could choose on both of my offhands as well. The other offhand here is similar. It both has critical hit chance and damage done to enemies suffering loss of control, so of course this is good, but the Storm Fury fix and the Tidal Rush fix here will do nothing. So here are some room for improvement, of course, but still, all in all, when we go through all of my items here in my setup, you can see that I have focused on every single little detail. I can also mention that if we go here now and take a look at my legacy of the Horadrim, we can see that right now my setup has focused a lot on secondaries because this is good for PvP, but for PvE content I would actually deal more damage if I would pivot away from secondaries and put more into damage because I'm already above the threshold, as I said. But yeah, I know that this was a little bit of a longer video, but now we have looked on my entire setup, and I hope that this was interesting for you guys. Now I'm gonna explain to you how the build works. So first of all, it's quite simple. I'm using Flowing Strike, and then I'm gonna use the primary attack all the time. I'm of course also gonna pair it with the Crosswind, and then I'm just gonna keep attacking. So whenever I engage, the first thing I will do is that I will use Rolling Surf, Crosswind, start attacking, use Squall, and then 2 quick Flowing Strikes in succession. And then I will just use the Squall and the Flowing Strike when it's ready. What's also important to mention is that I will attack the target from behind like this, because if we go back here and look at the Warband remnants, we can see that some of these requires us to attack from behind. So that's why I'm always attacking from behind. And yeah, I also move to make sure that I would have 100% uptime of the Squall, because if I would stand still like this, it would not work, because then this fix would not do its work. So very important to slide around from left to right behind like this. And yeah, it's not more complicated than that. Now of course you guys wonder, how much damage am I able to deal with this build? And I would say already now that this is the craziest damage output I've ever been able to achieve with any class. So let's now take a look at the dummy run and see the magic happen. So here we go. So now you will see me engage a dummy, and I use Rolling Surf, Crosswind, start attacking with the primary attack, followed by Squall and 2 quick Flowing Strikes. And after that I kinda use the skills when they are ready on cooldown. It's especially important for the Squall. I can be a little bit slower with the Flowing Strike. I just need to use it before the stun wears out, so that I keep the 100% uptime of the Ship of Stone Flesh. And you can see me now sliding from side to side behind the dummy, and as you can see, the damage output is crazy. And yeah, the real stars of this build is of course the Squall and the helmet and the first main hand, but there are so many other synergies at play here that adds up to this amazing damage output. And yeah, it's really crazy. And you will also notice now the reason why it's so important to have the correct amount of cooldown reduction is that we want to use the last Squall exactly at the 1 minute mark, so that I don't end up using Squall at, for example, 57 seconds, because then I will not get the damage buff during the 3 last seconds. And here you can also see the breakdown. Yes, you see the distribution of the damage. And yeah, I mean, I've never been able to dish out 3.7 billion damage in 1 minute before. It's actually bonkers, totally crazy. I have to say that from all the classes that I've played, it's the Tempest that will deliver the highest results on the dummy. And of course this is, as I said, thanks to the Squall, The damage buff you get from the main hand and the helmet is insane. The helmet was already really good, so when they dropped this essence for the main hand, I was just shaking my head because the Tempest was already very strong in terms of single target DPS. And what I can also mention is that they gave a similar effect to the Monk. I've already been showcasing it in a Monk video, where there is a Pant essence that will act the same way as the new Squall main hand essence and the Squall helmet essence that we're using in this video. But the difference there is that you need to stun the target in order to get the damage buff, and of course, since you can't stun a boss, that will not really work in many situations. But here with the Squall essences, you can use them on any target, and it's really strong. And yeah, I just wanted to show you this build, and I wanted to dive deep into every little detail. I know that this video is a little bit longer than it usually is, and I understand if some of you like the little bit shorter formats, but I think it's sometimes important to make a little bit of a longer video where I can explain something in a very detailed way. Let me put it that way. So I hope that for those of you who stayed around the entire duration of the video, that you found it useful. And I'm also of course very grateful for all of you for being here, and also those of you who just fast skipped forward to this dummy run. I'm very happy that you are here watching this channel as well, of course. But remember that if you're skipping segments of my build videos, you will often miss very crucial information. So if you are trying out the build, maybe you will not have the same results, or of course I understand that most people will not be able to deal as much damage as me, but maybe there are some key details that you will miss out on that will maybe make you discard a build, even though it's actually really strong. So yes, keep that in mind. But anyways, until next time, I want to wish you a very nice day or a very nice evening wherever you are. And to all of my clan members in Nyx, I would of course also like to say Voruk Nyx, Sholak Sol. So bye bye.
If a boy or if a girl subscribe to Oro's channel, let him take you to his world. Subscribe to Oro's channel, the best choice you will ever make. Subscribe to Oro's channel, hit the bell, a piece of cake. Subscribe to Oro's channel. But before, let me tell you one more time. Subscribe to Oro's channel. All the answers you will find if you subscribe.